Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's On the Beat. Mike Griffith here. Really pleased to have Hutson Mason with me tonight. Not a huge buildup. Georgia fans all know who Hutson is. He was the starting quarterback for Georgia in 2014. But before that, he was a backup. And before that, he was the Gatorade Player of the Year. 54 touchdown passes. Are you kidding me, man? Brock Vandergrift, get out of here. Let's look at what Hutson Mason did at Lassiter High School in Marietta, 4,560. Hutson, this is a long time ago, man, but I got to believe the adrenaline. I got to believe you start talking about doing the things that you did as a high school star, even a college star, beating Clemson. I mean, the heartbeat never really goes away, right?
Well, all those stats you just rattled off are old news, Mike. I mean, every kid that's coming now, and I think all those records have been broken, if I'm not mistaken. So the Deshaun Watsons and the Trevor Lawrence came and obliterated those records. So they lasted a little while, but now high school football was fun. You know how much people in this state love high school football, and it's some of the best memories I have.
No doubt about it, man. But to set the record for your era, it's kind of like Eric Zier. Like I always look up to Eric Zier. You know, he was the SEC all-time leading passer, and then Peyton Manning came along, but still to do something that's unprecedented, it really speaks well for you. The fact you stayed in state, you played for the Bulldogs, you were a backup. Before we get into any of this contemporary stuff, let me ask you, if this transfer rule would have been around back then, and I know hindsight's 2020, but you waited your turn behind Murray, would you have stuck around Georgia, or do you think you would have been out of there going somewhere else right away?
Yeah, it definitely would have made it harder stick around. I mean, one of the reasons I kind of had to stick around at a certain point in my career was because, when you get to year 3 and really year 4 of your career, it just didn't really make sense to transfer because you would have had to sit out a year. So now you're looking at, well, why would I transfer somewhere else to only play 1 year when I could stay here and play 1 year? So, it's definitely, and I talk to a lot of people all the time. I know there's this kind of epidemic and pandemic going on with transferring in the portal. But, the quarterback situation is the one specific position that I look at. And, there's certain cases where I understand why guys get up and leave. You only have a certain amount of time to kind of capitalize on that in college. And only one guy plays at that position. So it's a bit unique to the position we're talking about.
Yeah, and Kirby talked about that. And he, when all the field stuff was going on, it was almost like Kirby knew all this was coming. But so you've got a very interesting perspective on what's going on at Georgia right now. Haven't been in those shoes, haven't been that guy. And granted, Stetson Bennett was a walk-on, certainly not as accomplished of a quarterback as you were coming out of Marietta. Certainly not of your stature. I mean, you're a 6'3" guy. I mean, the NFL and the CFL, they were interested in you. I don't know if Stetson's going to get in there even to get a look when all this is said and done as a 5'9" guy. But what's your take on, I guess, just the story? I got to think at first part of his heart went out to the kid going, man, this guy paid his dues and now he's getting his time. I guess I'll just, share with me some of your thoughts on Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, it's pretty remarkable that for a kid who clearly wanted to play and chose to leave the program to go play at the JUCO level, decided to come back. I think that shows how much, the red and black means to him. And clearly, if you know anything about his story, he grew up going to Georgia games. So, there's no surprise there. But, I think every kid has that crossroads where if they're not playing as much or they don't expect to play as much, but they also love the program and grew up going to Georgia games and loving the university, they got to kind of decide that conundrum of, do I want to stay here to my loyalty or do I want to go play? So when he left JUCO and had a scholarship to come back, I mean, this quarterback room was loaded. There were 4-star, 5-star guys out the wazoo in that quarterback room, and he decided to come back. So, I think the one thing I can really appreciate and really tip my cap to is the guy's got he's got a moxie to him. He kind of, you can tell that he has been undervalued his whole life, probably because of his stature, and told that what he can't do his whole life. And so there was a bit of a risk and a gamble, and he bet on himself coming back here and has ended up being the guy and beating out some very quality quarterbacks. So he kind of reminds me of Gardner Minshew. A guy who, and he's kind of got that story to him where people didn't really take him serious for a while. And, based on performance and how many people he was able to beat out, and just, kept proving people wrong. He's at least put himself in a position where he's now starting at the University of Georgia.
If you're just joining the show, we're talking with Hutson Mason, former Georgia quarterback, also a co-host on the Buck and Hutch Show on 680 The Fan, each weekday 1 to 3. And Hutson's going to be calling the Missouri-Florida game for the SEC Network. So a very talented guy, certainly an up-and-comer in the media market and a former Georgia quarterback. I know the Bulldog fans certainly appreciate the career that you had and the dues that you paid, Hutson. And your opinion means so much as a guy that's walked in the shoes and played on those fields. It almost seems like right now, the Stetson Bennett story has kind of, I don't want to say hit a snag, but it's kind of gone from a feel-good story to is that all you got? Because we need more. I mean, this is such an I don't need to explain this to you, but maybe you can explain it to us. When you're a player in the program, do you realize just how unforgivable? I mean, you're the guy that followed the SEC's all-time leading passer, for goodness sakes. You went 10-3, and there's people still probably complaining that you didn't win enough. At 10-3 with a win over Clemson and a top 10 Auburn team at that.
I was one of the guys complaining we didn't win enough. So I understand that. We live in a different world now. It's amazing, Mike, how quickly it's changed in terms of social media and just, when I was in college in 2014, Instagram and Twitter and a lot of that stuff was becoming more prevalent, and it was becoming harder and harder to completely drown out the noise. And now it's flat out impossible. I tell kids all the time, and I tell parents, I'm like, you got to be mentally tough, man, to play this position, specifically at this level. And if you don't, it'll eat you alive. Like if you're not rooted in your confidence and your identity of who you are, and you kind of float by the wayside and you ride the emotional roller coaster week in and week out of what this conference and this passionate fan base can do to you. I mean, it can be an emotional roller coaster. So you have to learn to be mentally tough and kind of drown out the noise and not look for, seek out the approval of other people. You got to just be kind of steady Eddie and show up to work every single day. And, I think those are the guys that end up lasting the longest. And I think you see that out of Stetson. I mean, look, one of the things you can't deny is those guys in that locker room they kind of mold to him and they gel to him, and they kind of, you see it after games. They nicknamed the mailman. I thought Karl Malone had the naming rights to that, but I guess not. But you can see after games, I mean, they really believe in him, and I think that carries weight. I mean, I absolutely may not be the most talented guy in the room, but when those guys in that huddle look at you and they believe in you, there's something to that.
I think there's a lot to that. I think that's one of the reasons he's still the guy right now, because JT Daniels is a guy, Hutson. You broke down the film immediately, by the way. It was one of the best breakdowns that I saw after JT was kind of the surprise addition in May. You were right on it. You put some tweets out. You looked at the film. You told us all about him. Look, if the guy's knee is healthy, this is astonishing to me. It really is, because JT Daniels, well, I'll let you talk. You're the guest. You're the expert. You tell us what you saw about JT Daniels' talents.
Well, there's no doubt he's talented, Mike, and there's no doubt he's smart because, first off, let's talk about talent. He was the second highest rated quarterback, only behind Trevor Lawrence in his class. So that speaks for itself. And he started as a true freshman, an early rolling true freshman at USC. And this kind of leads me to I know how smart he is, because I believe he skipped his senior year or maybe skipped a semester of his senior year and enrolled early. So you're not only talking about he was smart enough to graduate high school early, but talented and smart enough to put it together and become the starting true freshman quarterback at USC. I mean, so, what does that mean now and how does it apply? Well, the guy's got talent. Yes, he's coming off a knee injury. And I know the guy's smart, but he's been in this system for a very small amount of time. And, without being at practice, it's such a frustrating and hard thing to be able to kind of connect the dots. But here's what I tell fans, and I've said this on the radio show a couple times, is, Kirby, as crazy as conspiracy theories as fans have, and I see him all the time on my Twitter timeline, some guy the other day was telling me that Kirby's too loyal to Stetson Bennett. He's loyal. And I was like, no, you know what these coaches are loyal to? Feeding their families. You know how they feed their families? They win. You know how they win? They play the guy that gives them the best chance to win. So what there's a lot of things that don't make sense. But what you can rest on is that Kirby is going to play the guy that gives him the best chance to win. Right now, that's Stetson Bennett. Now, will that be 3, 4, 5 weeks from now? I don't know. But I will say this. If we don't see Dwan Mathis or JT Daniels against Kentucky, then I don't think we'll see them at all this year, because really the bye week, I mean, look what the Dolphins are doing with Tua. The bye week is really the best time to make a quarterback change and to give a guy some reps with the wands if you're going to do it. But it just doesn't sound like, from the rhetoric that Kirby's using in the media, that a quarterback change is coming.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. You know, listening to Kirby today, he said Stetson's still working with the ones. You would have thought that if the competition was really open, that JT would have gotten some snaps with the ones, or Dwan would have gotten some snaps with the ones. But the fact that he didn't, the fact that they're putting all their resources into trying to get Stetson even more ready, the fact that Kirby says the biggest thing we can do is make everybody around Stetson better, you know. I just look at this, Hutson. Look, Mac Jones, and CBS did a great breakdown chart of Mac Jones passing against Georgia. And, you know, what an incredible job and what an incredible offense Alabama had. But if you looked at the passes more than 15 yards downfield, 5 out of 7, 219 yards. I mean, that's almost half of Alabama's yardage came on those deep throws. Hutson, those are throws that Stetson just can't make. And that's why George Pickens isn't getting the ball. I mean, you're breaking it down. It almost looks like they're playing in a phone booth, like every possession is a red zone possession because of his arm strength. If you're Georgia, and if this is what the future is going to be, how do they win with a quarterback like this that can't throw the deep out, that can't get the ball to George Pickens more than 5 or 6 times a game, and has to rely on the slots and those short throws over the middle?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that is they'll win, against the Kentuckys, and I think they can beat the Floridas and win out, but they won't beat the Alabama and the Clemsons of the world. That's just the reality of it. You know, I think part of those numbers, you're talking about getting George Pickens involved. I mean, it's been flat out unacceptable how little of a factor he's been in these games. And, you got to have explosive plays in college football and modern college football. And they've really got to come in the passing game. And I think, Kirby's at a crossroads. He really is. He is at a crossroads with an offensive identity. I mean, Nick Saban said it last week on ESPN, the first time he's ever publicly said it. He said, great defense doesn't win championships anymore. And I had to make that transition a couple years ago. And I was in denial, and I didn't really want to move on from it, but he did. And look where they are now, the elite of college football. And so, I think Todd Monken's got to do a better job of moving Pickens around. I think they've got to do a much better job of developing receiver talent. Alabama took away George Pickens, and they took away Kearis Jackson, and we just didn't have an answer. Trey Burton's still evolving. He had some big drops. And then look, we're getting some of these top-notch recruits at the receiver position. What's happening when they get to campus? Is there a developmental problem? So is it a scheme? Is it a system problem? And is it part of it is a quarterback problem too? I don't think Kirby, let me rephrase that. I know Kirby didn't expect Stetson Bennett, probably the last guy on the totem pole, to become the starting quarterback this year. Jamie Newman opted out. And then COVID definitely played a role, limited reps in the offseason. But here's kind of my takeaway, Mike, and I think you get to this point, and we've arrived at this point where you see Dwan Mathis, he didn't look ready. JT Daniels, we know he's super talented, but why isn't he getting reps? I think Kirby has over-recruited the quarterback position. And I think Kirby treats the quarterback room much like every other position where competition is king. They bring in, and his mantra is, let's bring in a plethora of 4 and 5 stars and y'all duke it out and the best guy wins. I don't think you can treat the quarterback room like that because only one guy plays. And what you're seeing is there's not enough reps to go around. I've been there before. As the number 2 guy during a week, you barely get reps. They all, 85, 90% of them go to the number 1 guy. So if they don't even have enough reps to develop the number 2 guy, they sure as heck haven't had enough reps to develop the guys who were 3, 4 in summertime on the totem pole, which ended up being the Dwan Mathises, the JT Daniels. So, I think Kirby has kind of mismanaged the recruiting, and I struggled kind of foreseeing where it was going when he was recruiting all these guys a couple months ago when he went out to the portal and he was getting all these guys. I was kind of sitting there going, what's the plan here? I don't really see it. But, you can't treat the quarterback room like you can every other position because there's only so many reps to go around. And the quarterback room is based on reps. You can't grow. The ultimate teacher is reps for the quarterback position.
Talking with Hutson Mason, he was Georgia's starting quarterback in 2014, former Georgia high school state record holder. Hutson chuckles at that. The record's been broken a few times 10 years ago, but man, I'm giving you props because that's something. Georgia high school football is a big deal, dude. And to do that in Marietta, Georgia, that's something. I'm not going to take that away and downplay that, nor will I downplay a 10-3 record and a win over Clemson, something that Georgia fans are drooling and dribbling for. A 10-3 season, Hutson, in 2014. Got to ask you for some recall on this, man. It's been a long time since Georgia's had a game with Clemson and a win over Clemson. How much did you savor it at the moment? How special is the rivalry? And here's the last question. If you could trade the Georgia Tech rivalry for the Clemson rivalry every year, should you do it? Would you do it?
Well, that's a good question. I've never been asked that. Yeah, I would trade it. I would trade it for the Clemson rivalry. I think it's more competitive. It's a little less lopsided. And quite frankly, I think probably a lot more. It's probably going to change since Collins is there. But when Paul Johnson was there, Georgia and Georgia Tech was kind of recruiting two different guys. So the guys that are going to Clemson are kind of the same players that are going to Georgia. And so there's more of a rivalry there because you grew up with those kids, going to camps with them, stuff like that. But yeah, it was funny. You bring up Brent Venables and Clemson in 2014. I actually was doing an interview today with some paper in Spartanburg, and they were asking me about Brent Venables. And I said, man, it's been so long. We only played him once. I don't remember a lot of the exact details. But he goes, do you know you're only one of 6 quarterbacks to beat Brent Venables in the past 6 years? And I was like, man, no, I didn't think about that. But, I was running through my mind thinking about the other 5 quarterbacks. And, they probably all came in, or 3 of them probably came in 2014 because I know they lost 3 games. And then Tony Dungy's son beat them when he was the quarterback at Syracuse a couple years ago. But, I mean, they're 26-0 recently. So, nobody's beaten Brent Venables in the past 3 or 4 years. Joe Burrow, I guess, last year. So, yeah, it was a cool little trivia question that I had no idea about.
Great stuff, Hutson. Man, I can't thank you enough. For the people that don't follow you already, listen, Hutson's on radio every day with Buck, 1 to 3 p.m. on 680 The Fan. Make sure you catch his work this weekend. He's going to be calling the game, Missouri, Florida. The guy's a rising star in the broadcasting industry. He's already done it at the college football level, made it to the top. He's going to make it to the top in television as well. Hutson, thank you so much for the great interview tonight. And I know it's tough to critique another quarterback at your home school, man, but great job. You didn't pull any punches. Great breakdown tonight. Thank you very much.
Yeah, anytime, Mike. Thanks for having me, man.
Great job from Hutson Mason. We're going to take a short break. Want to recognize Ingles, my sponsor. When we come back here in a minute, you're going to love this next guest. Matt Jones is with Kentucky Sports Radio. He's the founder. If you want to talk Kentucky sports, this is where it starts. This is the best guy to interview. Hands down, no question asked. You're going to get plenty of Big Blue on the second half. Get ready for it. He's going to take all shots and dish punches. Matt doesn't hold back. That's why I'm so excited to have him on as a guest tonight. But first, again, I want to recognize Ingles because, you think about this whole COVID-19 crisis, and Hutson was talking about that, just how difficult things have been for all of us, really, and how have we maintained and how have we pressed forward. And one of the ways we've done it is through our help and our folks at Ingles, the frontline workers, the folks that continue to get us our products, for us to take care of our families and get through these difficult times. I want to take a moment to recognize Ingles.
It's in our hearts to feel for real. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back. With open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
Well, welcome back to the show. You're watching the Ingles on the Beat show. Really appreciated having Hutson Mason on in the first half. Second half, Matt Jones. And Matt is a guy that I've known through social media for years and years and years. Had an opportunity to work with him a couple of times on the Paul Feinbaum show and really enjoyed his comments and his color commentary. Matt, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Glad to be here. I'm glad you're still allowed on the Paul Feinbaum show. They don't let me on anymore. Once you say something bad about one coach, and then the SEC blackballs you, and you're not allowed on. So I'm glad they still let you on.
Well, for the record, what you? Because
I don't even know. I talk bad about every coach, but for some reason at the SEC tournament like 2 years ago, I said that I didn't know if Quanzo Martin was a good enough coach at Missouri. And for some reason, that was the thing that was just too bad. Like, oh, no, let's not upset the folks at Missouri, the least interesting team in the conference. Hate to make Missouri basketball upset, and they can't have me on again. It's ridiculous. But what are you going to do? I love Paul. Maybe one day they'll lighten up a little bit with the SEC.
Thanks for the warning, because I've been critical of coaches lately, and now I know I better
Don't say anything about Quanzo Martin. That's the line that's too far.
You got to know where they draw the line. You know, looking up your bio, we're going to get to Kentucky, Georgia in a minute, but I want to learn a little bit more about you, man. I see you're the founder of Kentucky Sports Radio. So give me the story on this. How did this thing blow up? Because now, like I said, I mean, don't get me wrong, John Clay and Jerry Tipton are some of the best in the journalism business. A Lexington Herald Leader, one of the best papers in the country. Great respect for both of those men. But when it comes to the broadcast channels and the social media, you quickly became king. How did you do it, and how did you found Kentucky Sports Radio?
Well, it was good timing. I mean, I sort of created, it was 15 years ago last September, I created the website KentuckySportsRadio.com, and it was the perfect time. Blogs were just kind of becoming a thing. And as a lot of Kentucky fans sort of discovered sports on the internet and coverage on the internet, I was kind of there. And so it was like really good timing. And then same thing on Twitter. I was one of the very first sports reporters in the country on Twitter. And I got on Twitter early. It was like me and Pat Forty were like the only two people on Twitter back then. And I went and did the Rick Pitino trial. And the way it worked, you couldn't bring your phone into the courtroom. So I would every break run outside and tweet all the testimony, which included a lot of salacious stuff. And as people went on Twitter, there was I tweeting about Rick Pitino's sexual escapades. And next thing you know, the account sort of blew up and gave me a head start.
Not bad for a guy. I'm looking at your bio here. Transylvania University, full scholarship to Duke, second in your class. Quite an accomplished guy that just decided, you know what? I think I'd rather do sports. And so here's
being
Matt.
A lawyer is boring. Anybody can be a lawyer. I mean, have you ever met a lawyer that was like, you know what? My job is awesome, dude. I just get up every day and I file briefs, and I can't tell you how much I love it. Being a lawyer's fine. Like it's a job, but it's not. Nobody's on their deathbed wishing they had been a lawyer more. So, this was a chance to do something I loved. And it's kind of taken off, and it's taken me in weird places I never would have thought. So it's been great.
Well, you become a part of the SEC landscape, Matt, and you do a great job. And
I know sometimes I even fight with Dog Nation. Like when you told me you were doing this, like when you asked me to come on here, I didn't realize you were the Dog Nation guy. So I'm really happy.
I'm only one. I'm like one of them. I'm the one in Athens. You're probably thinking of Brandon Adams. He does a daily show. And
I don't remember. I just remember that during the Eddie Grand thing, like when
that was me.
When I said that you or that Eddie Grand had gotten offered the job at Georgia, everybody was like, "Oh, no, he didn't." And Dog Nation was like, "What does that guy know?" And so I said, "Well, I mean, they can say whatever they want. I know I'm right, and I still know I'm right. But I love that you asked me on. I like a little good Dog Nation talk."
We can agree to disagree. Boy, did Georgia miss out.
I mean, we can agree to disagree, but you're wrong. But otherwise, I'm totally fine with it. No, listen, you guys, you all ended up, I think, hiring the guy that Kentucky almost hired last time, right? Like Coley, was that who it was?
James Coley, yeah. He was the guy last year.
Yeah, Kentucky almost hired him when Stoops first got here. So I knew the name. But listen, Eddie Grant has done a great job here. Some fans are upset at him about how Kentucky's offense looks this year, but I think overall he's been very successful here.
Well, I was going to ask you that, because we saw Kentucky 2 years ago. The Georgia-Kentucky game was the de facto SEC East Division Championship. I was there. Kroger Field was bustling. It was it was one of the best game day environments I've been a part of in 30 years. I mean, the tailgating, the smiles, I mean, there was so much energy there. I think I have to go all the way back to when Hal Mummy and Kentucky beat Alabama and took the goalpost down in '97 for a scene that I would say rivaled that football site on that campus for me. But where's Kentucky now, Matt? I mean, they did dominate Tennessee. When they made that statement, I said, boy, that's a statement win, because I thought Tennessee had cleared that hurdle and was clearly the number 3 team in the East. And Kentucky said, not so fast. I was shocked. I thought it might be closer, but I was shocked that Missouri was able to dominate. What happened to Kentucky last Saturday?
It's hard to say. I don't really know the answer to that question. I mean, it was clear from moment one that they were not all into that game. They didn't have the effort. I mean, Missouri had a lot more energy. Missouri played with a lot more purpose. I also think Kentucky was sort of, about 5 years ago, Kentucky played South Carolina, and I thought it was a must win for the future of Mark Stoops at Kentucky. There was this idea that, like, if Kentucky was going to get good, they had to stop losing to South Carolina every single year. They had lost to them like 7 or 8 straight years. I think that was how Kentucky was for Missouri. You know, Missouri is 5-6 years away from the SEC championship game, but in the last 5 years has lost to Kentucky 5 straight times. And if you're a team like Missouri, you're like, look, if we want to make inroads, we can't just keep losing to Kentucky. So I think they were much more into the game. You know, Kentucky broke a long streak against Tennessee, a streak that really haunted the program. And I think they just looked past them. The other thing is, when they flipped the games and Georgia was supposed to come first, it kind of screwed Kentucky, because instead of playing Georgia and then Missouri, they played Missouri coming off a bye for Missouri, and they're playing Georgia coming off a bye for Georgia. And that wasn't an ideal situation. So I actually expect Kentucky to play well Saturday. I don't think they'll win, but you're right. 2 years ago, I don't think any Kentucky fan thought they were going to win that game against Georgia, but that was a moment where it felt like 7 years of building had kind of culminated in that moment. A national television game on CBS, winner goes to the SEC East. And while Georgia was better, Kentucky was competitive in that game. And that really was a culminating moment. 2 years later, the program's not where it was 2 years ago, but I still think it's much better than it's been through most of its history.
Yeah, well, it's because they're better at the line of scrimmage. I mean, Kentucky was a powder puff. I mean, they were a team you trucked, and they were a team that had to trick you, and they were a team that had to get gadgety, whether it was, you know, Jared Lorenzen or Hal Mummy, or, you know, what the crazy offense with Tim Couch. I saw some great Kentucky-Tennessee games, but Tennessee would win every year, even though Kentucky would put up these ridiculous numbers. Now it looks like they've built a legitimate, bona fide football program. I mean, this is not a pushover game. And Matt, I'm with you. I think Georgia will probably win by 14. I know the spread's 13, but I think it's going to be a competitive game. Kirby Smart, I sent you this stat earlier, only 2 and 3 in these noon kickoffs. And I think if you're Georgia, there's a tendency to look past this game, because Florida is the following week. And let's we may disagree on Eddie Grand forever, but I think we can both agree that the league seems to do whatever they can to help Florida. You know, they could have moved one game.
I feel the same way about you all. You guys, I mean, we could have, we were supposed to play you coming off the Tennessee game, then they give you a week off. So you listen, here's what the league does. It helps all of you good teams. I mean, just ask Missouri. Didn't they start the season with like LSU, Alabama? Like, they always help the good teams, and that's fine, because in basketball, they kind of help us. So I get it.
Kind of.
You know, the difference, well, first of all, you guys can't beat us no matter what, so it doesn't matter.
Well, you got 8 people on the court with those officials every time.
Oh, stop it. Listen, you all put Tom Crean, you hired the dorkiest dude in the United States as your coach. But anyway, I do think, though, the difference for Kentucky and the problem they're having this year is they have all of the pieces for a foundation of a good team, like a really good team. And Kentucky's never had that in my lifetime. They got a great offensive line, pretty good defensive line, good secondary. The problem they have is they don't have any stars. They don't have Josh Allen. They don't have Benny Snell. They don't have Lynn Bowden. So they don't have that breakaway guy. You mentioned Tim Couch. For years, Kentucky had the breakaway star. They just didn't have anybody else. So they'd have Tim Couch. They'd have Jared Lorenzen. They'd have Randall Cobb. They'd have these stars, but they didn't have the core pieces. This year, they kind of have the core pieces, but they don't have a star. And we saw it against Auburn, where Kentucky and Auburn were basically equal, but they had Seth Williams and we didn't. And that was the difference in the game. And I think that's been the problem for Kentucky. So, last year down in Athens, you remember the game was tied at halftime.
Yeah,
I mean,
0-0, right?
Kentucky was able to move the ball. Their defense they couldn't, it was Lynn Bowden's second game as quarterback. It was pouring rain, and it was a weird game. But I think on the line of scrimmage Saturday, these two teams will be close to even. Where you guys have the advantage is you just have a massive advantage at the skill positions. Kentucky's wide receivers are probably the worst in the conference, and that ultimately I think is what makes it hard.
Talking with Matt Jones, founder and operator and color man and analyst for the Kentucky Sports Radio Network, KSR. Is that right? Kentucky Sports Radio, which just like I said, took off. It's a website, and Matt does great work. You guys can tell he's a colorful character with a lot of opinions and a lot of knowledge to back it up. Opinions are great, but they're even better when you've got the knowledge to back it up, when you've got the sourcing. Matt, you had a breaking story last week. I don't know how you do it. I think you guys nail a lot of stories. Jeremy Pruitt fired a guy during the game. Now, this Jimmy Brumbo guy was a former Kentucky assistant. So I connected the dots here and said, okay, he knows somebody that knows Jimmy. And that's where how shocked were you and how certain of you are of this report that, yes, Jeremy Pruitt fired this coach in game?
Well, I mean, I'm certain of it because they won't deny it. I mean, like they're kind of having their reporters do what you did, which was say, no, it didn't happen, but he ain't denying it, the coach. And because I think he knows that, like, he doesn't want to get in a war of words because he knows what happened. Wasn't Jeremy Pruitt was with y'all at some point? Am I right about that?
Yeah, he was a defensive coordinator at Georgia for 2 years before he went back to Alabama.
So I don't know the guy, so I'm not trying to disparage him. I don't know him at all. But thing I have heard, and I've heard from some folks around your program, is that he's a crazy hothead. And everything I've seen seems to suggest he's certainly crazy, as you could see by that stupid bonnet he wore in that game against y'all instead of a mask. And he's clearly a hothead. And what I think happened, what I hear happened is he said, "You're fired" in the middle of the game. I think Brumbaugh thought, well, he's saying that. He doesn't really mean it. And then he did mean it. So, I mean, like they're going, well, he didn't tell him officially till after the game, but he told him during the game. It's just everybody thought he was just kind of losing his mind. And I would just say to you, Tennessee to me has the most ridiculous fans in sports. It's Tennessee football and Indiana basketball because they're all delusional. They think it's like the 90s and it's not anymore. But to me, if I'm looking at a coach at Tennessee, if I have a coach that can't keep his head in the middle of a game like that, I mean, you got to be able to rely on somebody to be your rock. Then that's what worries me. I mean, is Nick Saban going to be firing people during the game? Is he going to would Nick Saban even fire people the next day? I mean, he's not going to do that. The fact that Pruitt does it says to me what I've always thought, which is I just don't think he's going to be the guy either as much as the folks in Knoxville want him to be.
Yeah, you're probably right. They've kind of entered a difficult part of the schedule. They've got a bye week. Then they got to play at Arkansas. That's not a pushover game. And they still have Auburn ahead. With Auburn, a team that looks like they've turned the corner now, gotten a couple breaks, won a couple games, and that's how you get momentum. And like I said, that's kind of what it looked like Kentucky had done. The win over Tennessee was so convincing. The quarterback play is the thing that really bothers me, Matt. You mentioned the offensive line. We saw what Benny Snell had done there. You mentioned they don't have great receivers. But my question is, why not? Because typically it's getting those big linemen. That's the hardest thing, is to build that foundation at the line. So how does Kentucky get that close where they've got the table set and they got the beef, right? They just don't have the dessert. They don't have
they just haven't been able to recruit. I mean, they haven't been able to recruit those guys. And why? I think a couple times guys just haven't panned out for whatever reason. But they just haven't been able to recruit. And I think part of it is, look, you have Steven Johnson 4 years ago that wins at a very successful rate, but he doesn't throw a lot. And you're trying to win. You know this, Mike. You're trying to win. That's the most important thing. And Kentucky has realized, look, okay, I got Steven Johnson and Benny Snell. What's my best chance at winning? Running. All right. Then the next year, I got Benny Snell. What's my best chance? Run. What's the next year? Everybody gets hurt. You got Lynn Bowden. What's my best chance of winning? Run. And it's hard to recruit wide receivers when you're running the ball all the time. So I mean, I think it's a chicken or egg thing. How do you make a team able to pass well when you don't have receivers? Well, how do you have receivers when you don't pass well? And I think that's a tough thing. They just haven't been able to get a guy who could break out as a receiver. And I worry, they've got 3 great commitments in this class of wide receivers. I worry about them being able to hold on to them because they're watching and going, when are you going to throw the ball?
Listen, it would not be an interview with the Kentucky personality if I didn't ask about basketball. All right. I'm gonna let you off on the horse racing thing, but I gotta ask you about Cal. Now I gotta tell you, man, I gotta tell you a quick story. When Cal got hired, I'd been covering Tennessee basketball for quite a while. And when he was at Memphis, me and Dan Woken used to go at each other on social media all the time before we realized that really is not a cool thing to do if it gets too out of hand between sports writers. Yeah, no doubt. And so when Cal gets hired, I'm thinking, man, I can't wait for him to show up at the first SEC media days. We're going to ask him questions about UMass. We're going to ask him questions about investigations at Memphis. We're going to A-B. And sure enough, I wasn't the only SEC writer there. Everybody had that idea, and we were ready to get after Cal. So we circle up on Cal, and we start firing these questions, and he answers about 4 or 5 of them. And finally he says, guys, let me save you some time. You're firing arrows through a bazooka-sized hole, man. You're not going to get me upset today. Now, can we talk some basketball? Well, here we are, Matt, and Cal has been great for the league. I think he's evolved into a great spokesperson for the SEC. I have even started to like this guy. He's got charisma, but
first of all, why wouldn't you like him? I mean, I got your speech there about Cal, but why wouldn't you like him?
Because
he
hasn't won anything in 8 years.
Okay, stop it. First of all, y'all ain't never won anything ever. So forget about it. I mean, the thing is, he's won more games than any coach over the last decade. He's won more NCAA tournament games than any coach over the last decade. He's made more Final Fours than any coach over the last decade. He's made 5 Final Fours. How many has John or Mike Krzyzewski made in the last 10 years? 2. The only difference is the 2 times he went, he won the final game, and Kentucky lost the final game twice. Like, that's the difference. Now, if that makes you think he's not a good coach, that's on you. I will say this.
Saying that.
Well, but that's what a lot of people think. That's what well, of course you're asking, but it's not. You wouldn't ask Mike Krzyzewski why he's only made 2 Final Fours in the last 10 years. The other thing is this. While Cal's been here, everybody acts like he's some sleazy coach. Let's talk about how many SEC programs have been in trouble with the NCAA since Cal's been here, and how many times has Cal been in trouble since he's been here? None. And we've seen Tennessee get in trouble, Auburn get in trouble, LSU get in trouble, Arkansas get in trouble, all these schools, and guess who doesn't get in trouble? Cal. Look, when Cal came, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know. I was like, I hear all this stuff, Memphis, UMass, I have to tell you, man, I'm around it. If there's cheating going on, I don't see it. And that doesn't mean that, like, I wouldn't swear my life on any coach on earth, but I don't see it. And the other thing people have to remember is with the Memphis and UMass scandals, they didn't have anything to do with Cal. Marcus Camby hired an agent. How's that help John Calipari? And Derrick Rose cheated on the ACT allegedly. And guess what? He'd have had to cheat wherever he went to college because that was how he got in. So my point is just to say, it's easy to say, Cal this, Cal that. I was at the opening press conference. Pat Forty, he didn't think anybody was listening. And he was standing over to the side talking to some people. And I overheard him. And he goes, I'm going to bring this dude down. You just wait and see. In the next 2 years, I'm going to bring him down. And they've all tried and they've all missed. And I think it's because, as much as people don't like it, I think he's just good. And so he doesn't even need to cheat because you know why? They're good. And all you had to do was watch the NBA bubble. Think about who the stars of the NBA bubble were. Anthony Davis, Jamal Murray, Tyler Hero, Devin Booker. And where'd those dudes all go to school? Kentucky. That's why he's had success.
Well, it's a lot of fun, I'll tell you. I always enjoy covering games at Rupp Arena. I love the Kentucky basketball passion. And you know what, Matt? I like the Kentucky football passion. That fan base has gotten charged up. And again, I don't know where this year ends, but I know Kirby Smart is genuinely concerned about this game. Now, part of it's the early kickoff. Again, Kirby 2-3 in noon kickoffs with losses to Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, and South Carolina. So it ain't like it's never happened before. And a Georgia team, could they get caught looking ahead to Florida? Well, sure they could. The thing that you're telling me, though, about Kentucky getting the bye weeks thrown in front of them, that's unfortunate. I don't think it needed to be that way. That's a tough break for Kentucky. But I do think Kentucky, they proved something to me. They may not be ready to compete for championships, but I'll tell you, they've become a respectable program, and now they've got that fan base, Matt. And once you got the fans and the momentum behind you, a lot of things can happen.
Yeah, I think the game will be competitive. I don't expect Kentucky to win, but I do think this. Kentucky is now good enough that they can be in all these games. And when you're in these games, a play here or a play there, and you can pull it off. That's where Kentucky is. They don't have to win with a fluke. They can kind of be in them. Now, I don't know what's going to happen Saturday. I think Kentucky's in need of a bye. I think they're shaky at quarterback. But I will say this. I'd be surprised if they get punked. I'd be surprised if in the fourth quarter, you guys aren't still playing, because I do think Kentucky is talented enough at the line of scrimmage to do it. And I will say this too, to finish. I like Kirby Smart. He's actually a coach I enjoy watching. It does feel like to me, though, I sort of wonder if he's going to be the guy that, like, in 10 years, he's still there. He's a little better than Mark Richt was, but you never quite get over the hump. That's a tough place to be in, because, like, you guys, your program is, to me, clearly the second best program in the league consistently. But what would you rather be? Would you rather be like Gonzaga, who never wins a title but is good every year? Or do you want to be like UConn in basketball, who wins 2 titles in 12 years and doesn't even make the tournament the other years? You guys are heading towards a Gonzaga path, and I'm just not sure how awesome that is if you don't finally get one.
Well, you can ask Tennessee, because they finished second a lot before 98, and they kept finishing second, and they fired their coach 10 years later, and they haven't been back since.
That's exactly right. You got to be careful what you wish for when you get rid of somebody that makes you consistently good.
Great stuff. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy your work with Kentucky Sports Radio, man. Knocked it out of the park, as always. Thank you very much, Matt Jones from Kentucky Sports Radio. Great job. Fabulous guest. I knew you folks were going to enjoy having Matt on tonight. You know, we started out with Hutson Mason. I thought Hutson gave a great breakdown of the Georgia quarterback situation. Of course, Hutson lived it. He's been that guy. He'd been the backup that had to wait behind Aaron Murray. Finally got his chance. Understands what it's like to get those second-team reps. Talked about JT Daniels. He broke down the film. He knows how good he is. And then Matt Jones, the most dynamic of all the Kentucky media figures. Listen, you don't have to like him. You're entertained by him. And Matt brings facts to the table. Knew that you would enjoy Matt. Really thrilled that we were able to have him on Dog Nation tonight. I want to talk to you a little bit before I let you go tonight. I did some research, and I want to share it with you here on our channel tonight. And I appreciate everybody that's out there watching. I hope you guys have shared the show with your friends. It helps us out. It helps our sponsors out at Ingles. We want a lot of people to know about this Monday night show. If you guys haven't gotten a feel yet for it, it's a little bit different than what we do the rest of the week. You know, I do Friday Night Mike, and it's just me rapping and us talking. But on Monday nights, I like to have a Georgia figure on, and then I like to have a figure on from the other team. And every week, it's fun to see who we end up with. And really pleased with tonight's guest, Hutson Mason, who will be doing the call for the Florida-Missouri game. He's obviously a rising star. You hear him on 680 The Fan 1 to 3 weekdays. And Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio. And if you don't follow Matt yet, you need to follow him on Twitter, because he absolutely throws darts, and he doesn't miss often, except when he says that Eddie Gran got offered the offensive coordinator position, which Matt and I are going to disagree with forever. But he's got his sources that he'd live and die with, and I got my source on it. Sometimes my sources aren't that strong, but I got a bulletproof source. He's got a bulletproof source. So sometimes it's just like that in the media, but it's a fun game, and we both know how to play it. A lot of mutual respect there. Really appreciate Matt coming on. So what I wanted to talk to you about was some numbers I did. And if you had a chance to read my stories today, you got to see some of these statistics. A lot of people are saying, well, this year's offense is better than last year's offense. Well, no, not really. Not relative to the SEC. So I looked at all the major statistics: scoring offense, total offense, passing offense, pass efficiency, rushing, third down efficiency, red zone. There are some categories where this year's team has better numbers, but how it ranks relative to the SEC is lower. And that's what matters, because different years have different trends. Obviously, there's more offense this year. The most striking difference between Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett is in the red zone. Last year, Jake Fromm was number 2 in the SEC, red zone efficiency scoring 946. Georgia this year, 11th in the SEC, one of the worst teams in the SEC in red zone efficiency. Not good. Passing efficiency, Jake was 4th in the league last year, Stetson 9th in the league. So Stetson Bennett's not Jake Fromm. So the people that go, I think he's as good as Jake Fromm. He's not. It's not even close. Stetson can't throw the deep ball. What he can do all right, pretty well, but not great, okay? He's missed on some protections. He's missed on some reads. He's getting better. Kirby's doing what he can to accelerate this. This is only going to be Stetson's 4th start. So let's give the guy some grace in that respect. Stetson's had a bye week to work with the ones. Kirby stayed all in on him. Yes, he gave JT and Dwan some more reps, but he kept Stetson with the ones. So he didn't make any move to open up the competition. Somewhat surprised by that. But that's just kind of where it sits. So I thought that was interesting, and some numbers that you want to digest. I want to find some other numbers here that I did on targets. When we talk about targets, well, what do targets mean? Targets mean who are they throwing the football to, right? It tells you a lot about an offense when you look who they're going to. The best receiver on Georgia's team is still George Pickens. He's clearly the most talented. Karis Jackson's a nice player. I think Karis Jackson's going to play in the NFL. I think Karis Jackson is that good, but I don't think he's so good that he should have 34 targets while Pickens only has 22. But Karis lines up in the slot, closer to the quarterback, shorter throws. So far, by my math, 63 targets have gone to the slot receivers, right? Only 30 to the perimeter. The perimeter guys are further away. The perimeter guys typically run deeper routes. Georgia's not throwing deep ball. So what does that mean? It means that Karis Jackson and Jermaine Burton are going to be the primary guys. They'll do some things to try and work George Pickens in. But the thing about Pickens isn't a guy that's going to get 5 yards open like Jalen Waddle. He's not a 4.25 guy. He's got NFL speed, but what he really has is catch radius. And that takes a quarterback that can spot the ball and put it on the back shoulder, that can throw it in that location. Because if it's near George, he's bringing it in. He's still every bit as amazing as he was before. But because Stetson lacks the velocity, he's not able to put it in those spots like Jake Fromm was in the Sugar Bowl when George had whatever it was, 12 catches for 170 some yards. So some interesting statistics there. You heard me talk earlier about Georgia in these noon games, 2-3. Last year, South Carolina, noon game. Ole Miss over Georgia in 2016, noon game. Vanderbilt over Georgia 2016, noon game. Kirby Smart, 2-3, noon SEC games. That's a dangerous statistic. And why does it happen? It happens because Georgia is a great program, and it happens because the players become accustomed to the night games and the big stage. And I'll never forget Tennessee 1999 talking with T. Martin the day before they were supposed to go on the flight to go to Arkansas in 1999. Now, they'd beaten Arkansas the year before. You might remember the Clint Sterner fumble that led to Tennessee's national title. It took a miraculous break for Tennessee to win that championship. You would have thought they would be ready for Arkansas the next year. So I said to T, how much are you looking forward to going to Arkansas, getting that convincing win? Now, this was a Tennessee team that had 7 guys picked in the first 2 rounds. Incredibly talented team. They ended up losing, and I have no doubt that it correlated with what T told me. He said, man, it's a noon game. It's on Jefferson Pilot. It's not even on national TV. You know, we don't like he was honest. They don't like these noon games. These guys don't like these noon games. In Kentucky? We're going to play Kentucky at noon? Oh, put me to sleep after Alabama and next Florida. Human nature says Georgia's going to be flat in this game. Human nature says Kentucky's going to be up in this game. Kentucky took a beat down at Missouri, right? Kentucky has lost 10 straight to Georgia. But as I told Matt, as excited as they are, as motivated as they are, and now that Alabama's kind of giving you a formula to beat Stetson Bennett, they've got the blueprint. They don't have the players. Georgia will win this game comfortably. So those are some of my thoughts tonight. I'll take a look at some of your questions. Let's see if you guys have questions for me. Before we go here on our Ingles on the Beat show, my producer, Michael Carvel, appreciate Michael being there for me tonight. What do y'all got for me here? You guys got questions? Now's the time to ask them. Be more than happy to answer your questions. What do we have? Matt Jones is Mike with no filter. Well, Jermaine, Matt does go pretty crazy. He owns his own company, so I guess he doesn't have to have a filter. I would probably still have. I've worked enough places to know when I step over the line, and I really try to avoid that just out of class and out of respect. I mean, I thought Matt was fine. I thought Matt's appearance tonight was great. Appreciate the compliment, Ahmed Mashad. Kenneth Wiggins says, "Gotta go. Wife is home. Don't get in trouble with the wife, Kev. You can always come back and watch this later. But whatever you do, don't get in trouble with your loved ones. It's what we've got right now." Chad Buchanan says Stetson has reached his ceiling. Listen, I think Kirby knows that. And so I really wonder what's going on with JT Daniels, because I saw JT Daniels play 30 minutes of scrimmage. And he's going to remind you a lot of Jake with how quickly he gets through the progressions, the quick release, and the accuracy. Not sure where his mobility's at right now. To me, I think that's what's holding it up. I don't think Kirby Smart wants to put JT Daniels in a position to get hit and get injured until he knows that this kid is ready. Because we've talked about it before. Coming back from that knee physically might take a year, but sometimes psychologically it takes longer than that. And Kirby and Todd Monken are the one judging this. So I think they want to make sure that when they bring JT Daniels out, that he is truly ready to go. Like a German sports car. Needs to be finely calibrated, right? Not much margin for error here with a quarterback like a JT Daniels. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this works out. But I know the Georgia fans are frustrated and eager. All I can tell you, and I'm somebody that's covered college football a long time, a lot of great coaches, and I don't always agree with them. But I will say this, most always on the Kirby Smart decisions, even the ones that don't make sense at the time, I later learn things and I go, aha. And I also know this about Kirby Smart, probably one of the most maddening guys ever to compete against in cards, because he is the guy that slow plays everything. Kirby's the guy that if you play chess, when the timer, he's the guy that's going to wait until the very last moment to make the move and hit the buzzer. He slow plays everything. He is the most thorough decision maker I have covered as a beat guy. So while I would love to see JT Daniels get an opportunity because I think he's incredibly talented and I think he's the missing link to a national championship, there's got to be a reason. I just keep telling myself, Mike, you've covered Kirby 2 years now. You know this cat. You've seen him make decisions, right? And rarely have you seen Kirby make a decision and been wrong. Now, does he get out schemed and out coached? Sure, it happens to everybody, right? He made some bad calculations. His secondary wasn't ready to handle Alabama's movement. His guys need to be a little bit more on point. That's on them. I'm sure that him and Charlton Warren and Dan Lanning coached those guys up. But in the moment, they got confused. Lesson for Georgia. They may have gotten a little complacent on defense. Even though they talked about it all the time, I still think that Georgia defense got complacent. I think Alabama did him a favor exposing him like that. If and when there's a rematch, I expect Georgia to win it, provided JT's the quarterback, and maybe even with Stetson Bennett now that Jalen Waddle went down. You never want to see a guy get hurt, but let me tell you, Jalen Waddle is irreplaceable. He's a 4.2 40 guy. They can say whatever they want in Alabama. They never should have had him back returning kicks. That's why you didn't see DeAndre Swift returning kicks last year. There's certain guys that reach a stature and a level that you say, you know what? He's irreplaceable. We can't do it, right? So listen, that's my show for tonight. We've had a lot of fun tonight. I hope you enjoyed the product. Tomorrow, BA is going to be back with Dog Nation Daily at 10 a.m. Connor Riley goes tomorrow night. Wednesday night, you got Centel's Intel. Tell you, Jeff has been all over it with the recruiting. And I'm really looking forward to some of Jeff's content this week. I know he went to some games. I know he was in Tallahassee. Centel is loaded with recruiting content this week. Don't miss his show Wednesday night. And our cover for Thursday and Friday night, Mike will be back. So we have all sorts of entertainment for you all week during the evenings. Check out our website, dognation.com. And do me a favor, please, my last request on a Monday night. Give me a follow on Twitter at Mike Griffith 32. At Mike Griffith 32. Because I need to have an army of Georgia fans behind me when I tango with guys like Matt Jones. You can see, let me tell you, Matt is one of the kings of the jungle. He's one of the best. But that's because he's got an army of guys following him with Kentucky Sports Radio. Listen, our Dog Nation fans are great. We appreciate you, everybody. Have a wonderful month.